Sermon Smash!
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to Sermon Smash Bros. My name is Michael Poff.
And this is Matthew Jones. Sermon Smash Bros is a podcast where preachers are invited to deconstruct their sermons right before your very ears. Michael, episode 3, what's new?
Not much. How about you?
Oh, just thinking a lot about Star Wars these days, as I usually am. Who's on the podcast today?
Today we have Pastor Desiree Engelkens from Bradley Church the Nazarene.
Yeah, we sat down in the Bradley Church Nazarene Sanctuary right where she does her preaching and had a great conversation. Really neat time to get to know Pastor Des better, and we're thankful that she was able to come on the podcast. So without further ado, Pastor Des.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Sermon Smash Bros podcast. Today we have Pastor Des from Bradley Church of the Nazarene. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, awesome. So let's just start out by having you share kind of the heart of your sermon. What's the big move that you're making? Maybe tell us the text that you're using, and just share the heart of your sermon with us.
Sure. Well, actually, we're working through the book of Romans. And so technically this last Sunday I was on vacation. And so the week before we did kind of a 3-week thing on Romans chapter 12. And as we've been going through the book, it's just sort of been, sometimes we hit on a verse, sometimes we do a general idea, just kind of depends on what we're doing throughout it. But Romans 12 has a lot of meat to it, and so we've been kind of taking it in chunks. And the last one was on Romans 12, 9 through 21. And so in there, we reviewed some of the things we talked about before, and then the theme of this one was more love in action and what love looks like. And we're familiar with 1 Corinthians chapter 13, idea of love, but this is a different kind of love. And so normally we don't walk through the text verse by verse. We do that here and there, but we did this time and really talked about how hard love is and how much we're really not doing it. And so that's what we did this last time, just really dug in to say what it really is love.
So where do you start when you're preparing for a sermon? What is your first step of this sermon?
Okay, well, so since it was a sermon series, it's easy to begin that start because I just know, okay, this is the next text that we're in. And then, you always do throughout the week, you do your prayer time and all of that. But
what does that look like for you, the prayer time?
So I generally try to start it off in the morning. And prayer time, a lot of people think that they have to pray constantly, blah, 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 talk. And a lot of it is listening, and a lot of it is just bringing your Bible to your prayer time and reading it and hearing what comes through in those texts. And so it usually is in the morning. Sometimes it may be later as well. But just looking into the reading the Word, letting God talk, me talking, me not talking, and doing that, and just kind of really trying to hear what God is trying to say to me. So throughout the week, I got my prayer time, and then as far as getting started with this, I knew I have some Adam Clark things that I like to go through, look at the Greek and all of that. So it's doing your studies, looking at all of the other things, kind of your research, if you will, and then kind of putting that together, and then go forth from there.
Yeah, cool. So do you have any special rituals? Is there a certain place you always go? Is there something that you always have to be drinking while you're doing sermon prep? Do you have anything that's special to you that you do while you prepare sermons is always different?
There is no real special ritual. I'm usually working at home. I'm a bivocational pastor, so usually I'll do my job at Kankakee High School first, and then I will go home and do much of my work there. It's, sitting on the couch, got my laptop out, get all my resources around me, and then, of course, this might be amusing, but my dog and my cat. And it seems like every time I really want to buckle down and get busy, they don't want me to. And so I got the cat meowing, I got the dog laying his head in my lap, and so they're my ritual. But other than that, it's kind of getting everything down, sitting there and saying, okay, here we go.
From where do you draw inspiration from when you're writing a sermon? Is there something that you look to, or something that you're thinking of, or that has influenced how you do your sermon?
It's kind of all of the all of the above, really. Sometimes I'll be driving to work or driving wherever. You hear a song on Shine.fm, something clicks, and you're like, ah. Or you'll hear someone say something on the radio. Ah, yep, I relate to that, and then I bring it. Sometimes it's, again, driving, or you see something in nature. God brings something to you. Oftentimes when I'm just doing my normal Bible reading time, then a verse will just stick out that didn't stick out before, even though you've read it 100,000 times. Sometimes it's a conversation I have at work. I know I've had that many times at the high school, because you can't necessarily bring up your faith to people, but people know that I am a pastor there, and I've got like scripture on the wall, and sometimes they'll just sit. I have a little chair in there, and they'll just start saying things and talking. They're like, I don't know why I'm just telling you everything, and that kind of will sometimes stir up a message within me. So it's just all different kinds of inspirations, and of course, those things always they tie into here so well. And I can't, over and over and over again, the adult Sunday school teacher will say, that message was on point what we talked in Sunday school. And so it's so cool to see the message reiterated. So, yep, just different inspirations. And then you're like, you know what? That was just God. He did it.
Right. Yeah, that's great. So tell us a little bit about what resources you use. You already kind of talked about how you want to look at the original language and commentaries and stuff. Do you have go-to things for that?
My Adam Clark stuff at home, those are kind of my go-to. I also have some other holiness books at home, some Wesley things. I'm going to brag on him a little bit. My brother-in-law, Reverend Benjamin Pettit, he's out of Kalamazoo, Michigan. He actually has written some books, and he's really good with his theology. He's read every Wesley book there is out there. He's really studied it, so I'll sometimes check with his stuff. Of course, I'll check some resources on the internet, of course. Be careful with that when you're doing it.
Sure.
But yeah, just kind of have some other like little resources and things like that at home. And a lot of it, I try not to, I want to get that research, but I also want to just preach what God has told me. So I don't want to get too caught up in what other people say and detract from what God is trying to tell me.
Can you describe the moment that you knew what the message would be, and the catalyst for that?
Well, because this is a series, a while back, I don't know if I can't even remember, because we've been doing, since we're in Romans 12 now, it's been a week or two. So in the beginning, I probably read something and thought, you know what, I really want to go into Romans. But as far as this love and action sermon, as I was just reading it and reading, this is nice, I've read it over and over, this is lovely and it's love. But as I was reading these commentaries and really digging into, what it means to be hospitable, we think, I'll just invite someone into my house. Well, no, what if you needed someone to live in your house? Or, just kind of going into depth. So when I was reading those translations, that's when it really hit me, because I realized I'm not doing a very good job of it. I can do love to a certain level, but am I really sacrificing everything that I am? So it was in that translation time, reading those Adam Clark commentaries, that I really knew, I really need to dig deep into this and really try to communicate that with the congregation. So it was during that time.
That's good. So can you tell us how maybe this sermon in particular is responding theologically to the needs of your worshiping community?
Yeah. So again, because I knew, and I tell this to my congregation all the time, I say I'm preaching to myself, because I know that if God's talking to me, he's probably talking to someone else out here as well. And we recently started these connection cards, and I've heard other churches doing these, and I thought, you know what, this is a really good idea. And it has a spot on there that allows for a response. And so then they fill them out at the end, you collect them. And so one of the things I really wanted to do was communicate this idea of love, given some examples, and that way they could respond to them. And some people, say, I need to work on what love is, and I need to do these things better. And we're a small congregation, and so you get that more family feel. And we've just had a lot of, I wanted to really communicate, we're a family, but are we really acting like a family? We can say we're a family, we can say, I support you, but are we really? And so just kind of doing that with them and really helping them to understand that it's not just this talk, but it's action. Are we doing our actions?
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Is there an idea or a theological idea that is always in your sermon, a thread that you always try to bring up when you're preaching to this community?
Holiness, holiness, holiness. I did not grow up Nazarene. I became a Nazarene when I went to Olivet. And actually, again, it was my brother-in-law that introduced it to me. I fell in love with the doctrine. I believe the doctrine, and I want to stress that doctrine because I feel that it's not stressed enough. And if you read the Bible, over and over again, it's holiness, 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 and that's what allows us to have that relationship to him. So everything I try to somehow bring it back to that. And of course, Christ is the reason why we can be holy. It's through his strength that we can. And so I always try to get that in there to realize, we can't live half-hearted lives. We can't pretend to be sanctified. We really need to give ourselves and surrender to him. So it's always that surrenderance and holiness aspect.
Yeah. Well, let us give you a soapbox for a minute. What is holiness? It sounds like it's something you're passionate about. So.
I do love it. Well, I always just kind of say it's the easiest way I guess I describe it is surrenderance. When you get saved, I try to make it easy for all age levels. When you get saved, you invite Christ into your heart. When you get sanctified, you allow him to take over. So that's my little one-sentence way of describing it. Yeah. And so many times we want to grab on, even if it's, we'll surrender part of our lives, but not all of it. You can have my job, you can have my friends, but I want to take care of the money. I can't pay my tithe this week. I just can't afford it, But it's things like that where we need to trust him and just give our all to him. And so when we do that and help people to really understand that it's possible. God didn't say, be holy as I am holy, just to set us up for defeat. And so he gives us that strength, but we need to rely on him. And so many times we want to do it in our own strength.
Yeah. And so then in this sermon, you're calling people to that in reference to this love in action.
Yeah, and so many times I repeated it throughout the sermon. This love is hard. Mm-hmm. We can't do it without Christ. If we try to do it without him, we'll fail every time. So we have to give ourselves to him in order to love like he calls us to love. Yep.
That's good. That's good.
Can you describe your style of sermon?
So I guess sometimes it's kind of varied, but I'm a walker, so I don't like to just stand in the pulpit. I like to move. It helps people to kind of see, I like to keep people awake. Sunday mornings can be rough for people. So I'm a walker. Try to get people involved. So I'll often say, somebody say, holy, make them repeat me. Object lessons and visuals I love. The sermon before this one, we were talking about the parts of the body, so I brought in Mr. Potato Head, and I said, here, and I manipulated with that. If we talk about abiding in him, I'll bring in the branches and show him, So I'm very visual, and I like to get people involved, sometimes even have them respond, and answer, things like that. Sometimes I can be a hellfire preacher. Sometimes it's more on the lovey-dovey side. It just kind of varies, but I'm definitely trying not to do the standstill. I want to keep people involved and see the relevance and, so they're not falling asleep or getting distracted, that sort of thing. Totally. We're competing with a lot.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you teach during the day. Do you think that your practice of teaching regularly influences the way that you preach? You see a connection there?
It definitely connects with messages. Now, for 9 years, I worked at Edison Grade School. I worked with special needs kids. And so a lot of those things, I could almost put a Christian perspective on it and bring it into my sermons. A lot of the actions that I saw in kids or the way that teachers reacted or whatever. So I got a lot of stuff in there. And now that I work at Kankakee High School, I'm actually in the athletic department. And so a lot of times I tie things into sports now, which, in scripture too, we see that run the race and training. And so it works a lot, the whole coach's idea. And so, or even conversations we have in my office or things that I see, I can relate a lot of that into my sermons.
Yeah. So what makes this sermon distinctively a Pastor Des sermon?
What makes it distinctively Pastor Des? Probably, again, just because it's that the action of I'm calling you to do something. I don't, time and time, and I'm guilty of it, you listen to sermons and then you leave, and 5 minutes later you don't remember what you just heard. And so then if you can't remember it, how are you going to apply it? And so with these, because I'm telling them, like, look, this is what it looks like, and I've given you guys a challenge, then I think it's those challenges. I try to give them those challenges so that they don't go out and 5 minutes later forget it. And I think that's why, too, I always incorporate those object lessons. There are some things that, it was years ago, I compared us during Christmas to Misfits from Rudolph. And still, even now, I'll have people come and say, oh, we're Misfits, and they remember that because of that. So it's a Des sermon because it's got those images and that call to action.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
What did you expect your people, or how did you expect your people to respond to this message in the service and beyond the service? And did you see that happen?
Well, I hoped that their response would be that they would learn to love more, that they wouldn't just say, someone else can do that. And again, that was one thing I said, this isn't something where you can say, oh, well, so-and-so can love like that, and I'll just, let someone else take the responsibility. So my hope was that they would see that they themselves needed to take that responsibility. And then we did the response cards, and so when I saw those, there were people that marked on there that said, I need to learn to love better. And some people did other commitments, like they said, well, I'm going to read my Bible more. This week I'm going to pray for a half an hour a day, where they didn't before. So we saw those a lot in that. And since I was on vacation last week, it's kind of hard to see, if it carried on. Yeah. So hopefully in this, this next Sunday or Wednesdays, the next times I see them, I can kind of see if, it's going through. And that's my prayer. It's my hope.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you hope that this will shape what I call, I guess, your lived ecclesiology, how your people understand themselves in relationship to one another and to their community around them?
Well, I hope they see it's not, we live in a very self-centered world. It's all about me, all about my likes, all about pleasing myself. And so I hope that they'll see that they need to put themselves off to the side, and they need to love each other. They need to love those that they don't want to love. They need to love those at work, at school, at Walmart, that the person that cuts them off on the road, those sorts of things. So that was really my goal in this, is to get off of your little soapbox, get off of you and your pride, lay it down, and do what God has called us to do, and this to put others, in front of ourselves.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like Wesley. Yeah.
What is the function or primary reason to preach within your community?
The primary reason or function, well, so people will hear the word, people will respond to the word. Oftentimes I pray, dear Lord, let us hear you, let us respond to you, let us be saved, sanctified, healed, and delivered. We are here to share Christ, and so that people can come to know Christ. And even if people already know him or say that they're a Christian, to deepen their faith and deepen their walks, so they don't end up in this backslidden away from Christ mode. So the purpose of preaching is to get out the gospel, lift each other up, grow in faith.
That's good. How did this sermon, or even preparing this sermon, transform you? How did it shape you and your soul?
Yeah, I guess, again, it kind of goes back to that idea that I realized I wasn't loving like I should love. And I thought I was pretty good at it. Mm-hmm. I'm a pastor. I make my phone calls. I do my Facebook messages. I text people. I visit in hospitals. But, when you really sit down and looked at, and everybody listening needs to go read that passage now, but when you sit down and look and see what love is, and really the depth behind it, that it really is giving of all of yourself. Even it's inconvenient, it might cost you money, it might do those things, to realize, I need to further myself. And we all come up with excuses. We're busy, we're poor, we're whatever. People say to me, well, I can't volunteer because I'm too busy. And I say, well, I have a full-time job, I'm a pastor, I tutor, and then I got to take care of my house and make sure that my family is good, so I'm busy too. But we still have to do these things. God has called us to do that, and he gives us the strength. Sometimes we say we don't have the strength, but in the moment, God will give us what we need to do to do His will.
Yeah.
What did you learn about God from this text?
How much, one, how much He loves us. Again, just reiterates throughout the Bible. We see what He's done, but it's that example as well that, He's not going to tell us to do something that we can't do. So His, that we can depend on them, that He gives us the strength and He provides for us to be able to do these things. He's not just going to let us go and wing it. He gives us what we need.
Yeah, that's good. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sitting down with us and for
thank
talking.
you.
Great to be with you.
Yeah, it's been fun. We'll do it again sometime.
All right, awesome.